What's the best real life example of the butterfly effect? My girlfriend was hosting a charity fundraiser party and I decided to bring along a batch of tablet, like Scottish fudge. I got ready, prepped all the shiz, got out into my car, started driving and remembered I had left the tablet at home. I had already left and was just gonna leave the tablet, but it was for charity. I turned around and went home and got it. I was a little late, but oh well. Anyway, at the party, a lady comes up to me and starts telling me that the tablet tasted fantastic. It was just like her grandfather used to make it. We strike up conversation and everything goes pleasantly. During the conversation I mentioned that I'm soon gonna be out of work, but it's okay, I have plans. Because I was delighted she had enjoyed my tablet so much, I wrote her out a copy of the recipe. It's not hard to remember. It's basically just sugar and temperatures times. I went to give it to her and she was visibly touched. Anyway, a few weeks later I get a phone call from her husband offering me a job. I accepted it. I loved it. I worked my way up within the business and now I'm very happy to say that I feel I am doing pretty well. Maybe not the best example of the butterfly effect, but who knows where I would be now if I'd never turned back and got that tablet. Long story short, a major volcanic eruption in Iceland caused widespread famine in Western Europe, which helped trigger the French Revolution. Also, the French monarchy spent loads on helping the revolution in America. I failed a couple of uni courses and had to restructure my degree a little. As a result, I took a couple of classes that were not on the radar initially. In one of these classes, I picked a seat that happened to be next to an exchange student. 13 years and a kid later, we are living in her home country. All highly unlikely if I didn't fail a couple of exams. Chernobyl. Turning off safety features to test other safety features that then failed because they turned off some of the wrong safety features and then they tried to fix it in the wrong order, causing the worst nuclear disaster in world history. Lots of this guy saved Hitler, but there's an even better and relatively funny one. Hitler's father was an illegitimate child, and if he hadn't changed his last name to be like his father's, Hiedler to Hitler, then he would have been known as Adolf Schicklgruber. Some historians, such as the author of The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, have speculated that with such a ridiculous name, he never would have been taken seriously since the Nazis would have been seen as ridiculous shouting Heil Schicklgruber. They probably would have said Hail Adolf or something. As an everyday example, and it's a small thing, but one that happens to me a lot, missing the bus by a minute. Because of this I wind up catching a later train, and because of that I wind up missing the next bus I have to take. By then, traffic will have picked up considerably, making that last bus take all the longer to complete the route. So 1 minute can wind up costing me over an hour when all is said and done. This is why it drives me crazy when people dilly-dally when boarding, request stops they don't need, or otherwise gum up the works. They think, oh, it's just a second, what's the rush, when in reality there's 50 people on the bus who all might miss the train by a minute and have to wait 15 minutes more, resulting in, at least, 12.5 hours of collective wasted time. Just because one person couldn't be bothered to fish their bus pass out of their purse during all that time before their bus arrived. I seethe with rage when I see someone get on the bus and hold up everyone behind them trying to board because they're trying to find their pass. Jerry Ryan's 7 of 9. Divorce led to Barack Obama becoming president. She was married to Republican Jack Ryan, Obama's opponent in the 2004 Illinois Senate race. Her divorce files became public and it was revealed that Jack Ryan had wanted her to perform sexual acts with him in public and sex clubs. This tanked Ryan's campaign and Obama won the seat, then went on to become president 4 years later. Which then led Obama to mock Trump during the dinner and likely inspiring him to run for the presidency. So 7 of 9 getting a divorce gave us President Donald Trump. The Ottomans blocking trade routes from Europe to Asia led to explorers attempting to get to Asia by sailing west and discovering the Americas. So the Ottomans caused the election of Donald Trump. Bill Cosby is indirectly responsible for the creation of Rick and Morty. Justin Roiland made an internet cartoon series called House of Cosbys, which was about a bunch of Bill Cosby clones. Bill Cosby had his lawyers send a cease and desist letter when he found out about it. In protest, Roiland created The Real Adventures of Doc and Marty, poking fun at the legal issues by using obvious parodies of Doc Brown and Marty McFly from Back to the Future. These characters eventually evolved into Rick Sanchez and Morty Smith. If Bill Cosby never sent that cease and desist letter, Rick and Morty may have never existed. Gosh, what a nice fella. If the Buffalo Bills hadn't lost a specific game, they wouldn't have drafted O.J. Simpson. Then O.J. would have never met Nicole and all the exponential results from the murder and trial. And we never have to hear about the Kardashians. As a kid, I was ill a lot and missed quite a bit of school. I had the option to repeat the year and get better grades, or carry on and somehow finish. I took the option to retake the year. Having had the meeting with the principal, I decided to change one of the subjects I was doing as an afterthought, as I thought art would be more of a laugh and easy subject. To cut a long story full of coincidences short, I ended up enjoying it, going to uni, meeting my wife, having a career as an illustrator, and now have a family. If I hadn't made that sudden decision, my life would be very, very different now. Not talking to and reading to your toddler can have unbelievable consequences down the line. The word gap is a big deal. Get your kid to read early and be excited about reading with them. Libraries do free story time and stuff as well. Make them read you a story, a chapter, their papers. Regardless of the age, it is that important. Reminds me of this great quote. Listen earnestly to anything your children want to tell you, no matter what. If you don't listen eagerly to the little stuff when they are little, they won't tell you the big stuff when they are big, because to them all of it has always been big stuff. US railroads are exactly 4 feet 8.5 inches wide. Why did they pick such an odd number for that? Well, the same people who built the first railways in America happened to be wagon makers, and their tools were all designed to make wagons that were 4 feet 8.5 inches wide. Why that size for wagons? Because that is the size they made them in England. So why did they make it that size in England? It's because all of the roads already had ruts in them that were this size, and if you made wagons smaller, the wheels would snap trying to fit into the ruts. So they made the wagons the right size to fit. So why were the ruts that size? Well, 2000 years ago, when the Romans conquered most of Europe, their war wagons were the ones that made the first roads, and so every wagon after that had to be made to the same size as those ancient Roman war chariots. So, why were the chariots that size? Turns out 4 foot 8.5 inches is the minimum size needed to fit the butt end of 2 Roman war horses in the front of their chariots. Now, remember the US space shuttle? Remember those tall white rockets on either side of the main orange tank? Those are solid rocket boosters, and they are made in America but have to be shipped to Cape Canaveral via railway. The engineers who designed the space shuttle had wanted those boosters to be fatter, but the railway went through several tunnels which were just wide enough to accommodate a rail car with a width of 4 feet 8.5 inches. This means that a critical design feature of one of the most complicated machines ever built by mankind was decided over 2000 years ago based on the width of a horse's butt. Peter William Lount. I'd seen this posted in a similar thread but thought it was pretty fitting for this one. The invasion of Iraq by the US might never have happened if not for a ship of Cuban immigrants sinking and leaving a boy named Elian Gonzalez to be rescued by fishermen and taken to Florida. In 1999, this boat carrying a dozen or so Cuban immigrants sank, killing the mother of Elian and putting him into the hands of relatives of his in Florida. The incident became an international story, and Elian's father, who was still in Cuba, wanted him back. What would normally be a clear-cut custody case. The last 50 years of Cuban-American relations complicated the process. Because of Castro's heavy-handed rule, most Cuban Americans believed sending Elian back was unthinkable, but the letter of the law is clear, and the US governor orders Elian back to Cuba. His relatives refuse and choose to keep him, creating quite a volatile situation. An armed border patrol team stormed the house to take Elian by force, and although no one was hurt, PR surrounding the raid was a shitstorm. The Cuban Americans, mostly in Florida, dislike then President Clinton, and as one might imagine, were happy election year was up, with Al Gore Clinton's VP, running against GWB. In one of the closest elections in US history, GWB wins out with many attributing the win to Florida going a little extra red than normal. This is a very controversial topic and I won't take sides, but if Gore had won Florida he would have won the election and most likely would have, at least tried, to prevent the invasion of Iraq. Obviously there are no guarantees in this world, but it's interesting to consider the possibility that if Elian had drowned, or if the US had allowed him to stay stateside, Cubans in Florida might have voted more blue, Gore might have won, and we might never have touched Iraq. If not for that kid, my brother wouldn't be named Elian. Dang. Traffic jams almost always are caused by stupid drivers driving stupidly. In rush hour, if you cut someone off you cause them to step on their brakes, then everyone behind them has too. This propagates a wave of braking that can go on for miles and hours after the original incident. Driving home south from Idaho after the eclipse, it's freaking terrible. 5 miles per hour for the last hour. My wife could have gone to college for free by doing 2 years in community college and then finishing in a bigger university. Instead, she decided to go straight to a large university so she can live on campus to get the college feel. She couldn't afford it, so ended up having to go to a less expensive college and live at home. That college forced her to restart from the beginning more or less. As an education major, she had to observe a class in her new freshman year. She picked my senior year English class and ended up sitting at the desk right next to mine. This is how we met. Now almost 10 years later, we've been married for 5 years and have a kid. My best guy friend, I'm female, broke his arm going in for a layup playing basketball. He was also on our co-ed softball team. Due to his injury, we posted an ad on CL for a new player. My future husband is the one that replied to the ad. It's a total mind frick. We've been married for 9 years now and have 3 wonderful children. I always think that none of this would be if my friend wouldn't have broken his arm. 2007 writers' strike. With no new episodes of Scrubs or The Office, NBC decided to put a new spin on a show that had originally had poor ratings and was due to be cancelled. That show was The Celebrity Apprentice. That made Trump more of a household name. And now here we are with its main character as president. Freaking writers. Trump had been a household name for decades before The Apprentice. If the dude who assassinated Franz Ferdinand in Serbia didn't stop for his sandwich, World War I might not have started. If World War I didn't start, Hitler would have went to art school. If Hitler went to art school, Germany wouldn't get on steroids. 9/11, Cold War, Bay of Pigs, Syrian Civil War. Everything would be different if one depressed sucker chose not to eat his favorite sandwich. My car breaking down led me to meet my husband. My car was 18 years old and inevitably broke down one day. I worked about 20 miles north of the city I lived in a suburb. Car was in the shop and I needed a ride home from someone who also lived in that direction. I called someone I knew who worked at another social service agency to see if he could give me a ride. He not only drove me home, he offered to set me up with a friend of his he worked with. A few weeks later we met, and that was it. JFK, born with one leg shorter than the other, meaning he had an unstable back. Fast forward to that day in Dallas, and had he not been wearing a back brace to keep him upright, he would have been able to duck out the way of the second bullet. JFK may have survived if his legs were the same length. I feel like this one is too far back. 4 years from winning a seat to becoming president is one thing, but redoing someone's entire life would drastically reduce the chances of the same outcomes occurring. This one's a bit of a stretch, since there were tons of other variables that caused it to happen, but it's a fun one nonetheless. War of Austrian Succession, 1740 to 1748. Causes Austria to lose Silesia to Prussia. This leads to Austria siding with France and Russia to get Silesia back in the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, causing Great Britain and Prussia to ally together, and results in Great Britain taking Canada from the French. This leads to American War of Independence, 1776 to 1783, after Britain levies taxes to Americans for previous war. France nearly bankrupts itself, helping the Americans in revenge against the British. This leads to a badly weakened France overthrown in the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799. This leads to Napoleon rising to power, 1799 to 1814. Napoleonic Wars led Europe to establish a system of alliances, in the hopes of preventing wars of that scale. These alliances would then go on to cause World War I, 1914 to 1918. The after effects of World War I, with the destruction of old empires, rise of communism and fascism, eventually caused World War II, 1939 to 1945. World War II led to the Cold War with the US and Soviet Union, leading to the modern world we live in today, post-Cold War. So technically everything is as it is because people threw a hissy fit over Maria Theresa becoming the ruler of Austria in the 18th century. Your own human life. You are the living and breathing example of the butterfly effect. Think about it for a second. Every little thing that your ancestors and everyone before you have done led up to you. Right now, everything you're doing is a butterfly effect. Are you working hard towards your dreams, or are you procrastinating and wasting your time away? Did you take 10 seconds of extreme courage to try something new and meet new people, or did you stay within your comfort zone? Are you dedicating 15 minutes to exercise every day, or are you still on your couch eating Doritos and Mountain Dew while browsing Reddit? Whatever you do right now matters. It may be a little difficult to remember this in our daily lives, but each little decision you make will drastically change how your future plays out. You're the best example of the butterfly effect there is. Recognize this and realize that the little decisions you make will affect how your future turns out. I rarely post on Reddit, but hopefully one of you finds this useful. I was at this party once, and while I was there I felt hungry, so I walked over to the kitchen and grabbed a slice of pizza. This slice of pizza happened to be the last one, and this box happened to be the last one also. A minute passed and I hear a man's voice yelling. I walk over to the kitchen and this guy was throwing a beef fit over the lack of pizza. What kind of party is this? There's no food, he screamed as about 24 people just stared at him. His girlfriend was there with him and tied up and walked out the house. A month later I found out my buddy has been seeing this new girl. This girl happened to be the one who left the party in tears. Years later they got married and most recently they had a child. Best pizza I've ever eaten. Weather. We can't accurately predict it 2 days in advance because there are too many variables influencing each other. Wind drives clouds. Clouds affect shadow and humidity and therefore heat and the airflow and so on. 1 minute of rain can alter the temperature, thus redirecting a bigger cloud slightly, changing the rainfall even more. Another example would be science. Thermodynamics research, for example. One tiny error in the beginning of the measurement or your instrument's calibration can grow through repeated measurements, completely warping the results. This is why you need to estimate every error margin and add them all together before getting nice ranges of possible values. This is actually the exact reason it's called the butterfly effect, because a butterfly who flaps its wings can cause a tornado or something. I didn't graduate high school. I had a mental breakdown and was taken off the roster since I was over 18. At the time, I wanted to go to school to be a movie director. Years of retail filled my time, and my customer service skills allowed me to get a pharmacy job. I found my passion, and I'm going to school, 10 years later, to be a pharmacist. Had I graduated high school, I would have paid away a ton of money on a useless degree I don't even want anymore. Severe depression has silver linings. My existence, I suppose. My dad wasn't the best student, and so he took grade 10 geography when he was in grade 11. My mom was in grade 10 geography when she was in grade 10. That is how they met. I still don't know if my dad was there because he failed, or he just wanted to take an easier social studies class. Kendrick Lamar's father worked at a chicken joint in Compton. A notorious gang member, Anthony would come by pretty often and Kendrick's dad always gave him some free food and whatnot because he knew his reputation on the street and wanted to get on his good side. One day Anthony decided to rob the chicken place while Kendrick's dad was working and decided to spare his life. Anthony later went on to own a record label called Top Dog Entertainment, which Kendrick Lamar is signed to. When his dad came to visit Kendrick at the music studio one day, they both recognized each other and realized the events of that day changed both of their lives forever. Camilla having sex with Prince Charles led to Diana's death. Had she remained a virgin, Charles could have married her and never met Diana Spencer. Camilla was already married with 2 children. She is also a Catholic. Woodrow Wilson and the Vietnam War. Ho Chi Minh wanted to meet with Woodrow Wilson since one of the 14 points was self-determination and perhaps help Vietnam become an independent country. Wilson does not meet with him, so Ho and other anti-colonialists then build their own movement with communist ideologies, and this sets up the Vietnam War. George II had 2 sons, Prince George III and Prince Philip. Prince Philip was playing cricket when he was hit too hard on the head by a ball and then he died. So when George II died, George III took his place. He later fell mentally ill. Because of this, the British government was disorganized and spent a lot of money, so they decided to tax the colonies more. This led to the American Revolution, which led to the French Revolution, which led to Napoleon, which led to World War I, which led to World War II, which led to the Cold War, which led to loads of wars, which then leads us to today. So if that ball had missed, we would be living in a completely different world. Ronald Reagan's budget cuts prevented my dad from getting on permanent with the National Park Service, his dream career. If he had gotten on permanent, he would have never moved to Colorado. A friend from the NPS told him about a job in Colorado he might be interested in. Anyway, if he had not moved out to Colorado and worked in that particular job, he would have never met my mom. My brothers and I wouldn't exist. The family home would have belonged to someone else. All the pets we had would have been someone else's. My hometown would have been someone else's hometown, and you'd be reading someone else's post right now. I'm definitely not a Reagan fan, but dang, I owe him one. Around 2000 years ago, a lady told her husband she got pregnant while remaining a virgin. Boy, did that story get out of hand. I just assumed her and Joseph were doing creative maths the way a lot of Catholic girls do. It's amazing how many kids I knew that were born premature around 6 months after their parents got married. Apparently you shouldn't bring up this theory in Sunday school. That time John Titor traveled to 1898 and killed Mo Johnson, the father of Hitler's assassin, in order for World War II to go on long enough for Turing to complete his work. To churro. One single blue bad tweet in the US could cause a chain reaction in Eastern Asia and cause World War III and nuclear winter worldwide. Kardashian family. Somewhere online somebody broke down why they became famous down to an inning at a ball game or some shit. It was right there on the internet, so it must be true. I know it is not the butterfly effect, but every time I see an auto accident, especially T-bone type, I cannot but be amazed at the number of things that had to happen, or not happen, for those 2 cars to arrive at the same place at the same time. If only one caught a red light, or drove a mile an hour faster or slower, let a car into line, any of 1,000 things. 10 years back, I was staying with my then long distance girlfriend for the summer, but she had to go work a shift on the day I was heading home to see my family. We had a really stupid argument that morning. This was very early in the relationship. We took the same bus, her to work, me to the train station. She got off earlier than I did on very bad terms, as we were both too stubborn to make up, and I went to catch the 8-hour trip home by train. I was a dong in those days and 100% know for sure we'd have never seen each other again, had she not turned up at the train station right as my train pulled up to the platform. We've been together 8 years, married too. Gavrilo Princip happens to be sitting at the right street corner eating a sadness sandwich over the failed assassination plot of Archduke Ferdinand II. Driver makes a wrong turn and ends up right next to Princip. Gunshot, and then the entire course of the 20th century as we know it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.